Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm very happy to made it in time, so I can tell you this was really a last-minute chance to me to come over the Autobahn here. But I think in the next half hour I will give you a little impression about the implementation of AI in very, let's say, serious use cases. We all know that AI is a big contributor for productivity and efficiency in many, many cases. But according to Gartner, for instance, about only 10% of the commodity AI is really taken to more productivity. Whether the other thing is actually, when you talk about serious AI, when it comes to data privacy, data security, and all that stuff, actually, where data is really, really on the edge of the knowledge, then we talk about the chance or the opportunity of increasing to about 60% in efficiency and productivity in various departments. So about a year ago, a customer of us in the financial business here, not far away from here, and us, we came together and we had a discussion about the requirements, what actually they are looking for when they are talking about serious AI implementation for certain use cases. So we came to the idea to develop some application jointly with them based on the compliance requirements, but also on the technology requirements, and of course, last not least, the most important one, the use cases. So let me, here it is. No, okay. As you can see, AI is actually everywhere today, but of course we definitely are faced and forced with a lot of regulations across the globe in various dimensions. You all are very aware about the EU AI Act, but other countries and other regions have their own AI, let's say, regulations and frameworks. So that means even if you have a great idea and you want to bring it down to the production, then you always have to make sure that this is really matching those requirements. And this is presently a big hurdle for many companies because there's a big possibility to introduce AI for certain use cases, as I said before, but due to the fact that there are actually requirements to be passed over, that's a big hurdle. On the other hand, when we talk about enterprise AI, it should be secure. That means data should not leave the enterprise, or security is on highest concern. No one wants actually to have customer contracts or something spread out in the internet and you can go to ChatGPT and ask what your competitor is doing. These are actually some examples from the early days when AI was introduced in cloud components, by the way. The other thing is it should be ethical. Ethical AI is of highest concern, so we don't have any bias in the data and also any bias in actually the response you get from such a system. Transparency is also important because you want to understand when an AI system gives you an information back, where the information was coming from and why this information was given. If I ask you, for instance, about a certain question and you gave me an answer and I say, well, this is the answer, maybe I want to understand why the answer is actually and where is the evidence of the data and the information on that. It should be explainable, and this leads actually in the same direction, and also we talked about that earlier, compliant. A very important thing is also, especially here in Europe, is sustainability. I come to that in a minute because sustainability for AI is something maybe especially users or programmers or everybody who is not on the machine level here is really away from what it really takes actually in questions of energy and technology behind there. And you will see some numbers that are very, let's say, exciting, let me say it this way. And that's actually those numbers here, what I want to share. Why this is all happening here today, this AI thing. And I was just taking the example of NVIDIA, and I gave you an example about Google Brain. This was a project about 12 years ago, starting with about 1,000 servers. And in those days, they had actually just about 50 teraflops of power performance on the chips. So 50 teraflops at those days was a very, very high number. And actually, everybody everybody in HPC computing was considering, oh, is this on the way already to petaflop computing? And as you can see, NVIDIA came out with the Pascal generation. I think it was in 2015 when we introduced those. We already had with 3 GPUs already the power of 62 teraflops. I was doing this on an average here with a 32-bit accuracy here. Today, of course, we are adding a much more performance to the systems. That means also on the other hand, we're adding more accuracy, we get more performance for calculations, we can do much more with less energy for per thread. But on the other hand, of course, we are adding even more GPUs. And that's an example. I was talking with Mark Zuckerberg recently in Seattle, and he was actually showing also these numbers here. They are building up about a data center with about 300,000 GPUs, and I was calculating those numbers here. I said, well, if you do that, it will lead up to about 23 exaflops. This is really a number, a really big number with 18 zeros actually, and it will consume just for the GPUs about 245 megawatts. So you can imagine what 245 megawatts is. This is more than the city of Frankfurt usually consumes on a single day. That means the data center performance and compute performance is of highest consideration when we come to sustainability. And users usually also ask, meanwhile, how much energy do I really take if I ask a question against my AI system? And you can try that actually. If you have a ChatGPT or a professional one, you can actually operate on up to 4,000 GPUs, and you can do your math alone and see how many energy or how much energy you're really consuming on that. I think that's something we can skip quickly because these are, let's say, the requirements when you talk about an AI system in general. So that means actually we need to understand how scalable is such a system. Are we talking about a single user or single process? Are we talking about millions or thousands of users? How much energy, how much servers, how much performance do I need for that? Then the other thing, and I think this is also a very vital one, especially in today, is actually how long does it take me to bring an AI solution to production from, let's say, from design to production, and secondly also, of course, time to reaction once it is actually in production, that we really can take the benefits out. So we are talking about the return on invest discussion on here. Then last not least, we have the use cases and the effectiveness. So it makes little sense to invest a lot of money probably in a very dedicated, specialized application if the effectiveness after that is not really given. Though therefore, of course, that's also a very regular question, anything. But also about the accuracy here, it's also important, and accuracy is also meant in consideration of data. And we all know data is a ground source for everything here. If we don't have the data, we should not actually consider AI in such a situation anyhow. Then we talked about this compliance and interpretability regulation assemble here, and that's actually also something we need to consider. What we have done here, we have built a knowledge system. That means actually digital advisors are well known today, but a digital advisor in such a way that it's really someone or some her who really can help you in a way that she builds or that the system builds up a knowledge on a specific topic. For instance, contract management, risk management, areas where we actually have a lot of lack in between, and there is a lot of communication necessary. I will just give you an example on that. Building up the knowledge for all of us means if we want to build up knowledge, we have to read books like Dango's books before to understand really what is in. So we all learn about the information we are gathering. The same is to be done with a system. If I want to ask a system about a certain situation or about a certain thing, then of course a system should understand what I'm asking for and not just giving a general application or general answer on that. Maybe my data is very private because, as I said before, it's not something I want to train open AI or Microsoft Copilot or something like that. That's definitely something I want to keep in my possession, in my company, and also for compliance regulations, I need to make sure that it is not leaving my premises. So when we look back, and I was taking this picture here from an old video from one of my customers here in Frankfurt, and when you see a distributed learning, that was actually and still happening today. It may be in all of our companies, I'm pretty sure this is still going on. When you have, let's say, 10 people working on a certain project or 10 people working in a certain department and the manager is asking about a certain question, he might end up and say, well, that's a question for Peter or Sue or somebody else. So you usually start actually with a team meeting or something like that. And the team always have to consolidate and also the information up front. Imagine you would have a system that is already gathering all that information, can consolidate it, and then you have actually an answering machine where you can trust on and of course shorten those times in here, but also of course regarding compliance and ethics, like I said before. That's a consolidated knowledge what we talk about here. And today, if I look in customers' environments, we actually see this is happening many times. They are overwhelmed with information coming from various sources, and it needs to be learned, it needs to be interpreted, it needs to be taken to the next level. And this is really something, of course, that takes a long, long time and hinders, on the other hand, our productivity to be more efficient in the company. So when we consider something, and this is a picture because people usually ask me also, oh, if we introduce a digital agent like yours here or digital assistant here like yours, this will take over maybe some jobs. And I say, well, that's not a discussion here. This is a digital advisor, should be a helper. It should be somebody who supports a team. It's not a replacement for someone. This was a very, very tough discussions what are going on presently in the industry because especially the councils are very concerned about what is AI taking over time, and that's definitely something we want to make sure that this is not going to happen, and it should be definitely an assistant to the team, but not a replacement. And considering the business problems, we want to have fast access to very reliable information, fast access. I have a customer, they have about 70,000 pages of legal text per week, 70,000 pages per week. You can from the whole globe, so you can understand what it means to read and interpret 70,000 pages by reading it, and of course there are a lot of cross notes in there, and all of that material needs to be understood. And if they're doing a reporting later on for BaFin or for SEC or somebody else, and they miss a goal, or maybe they have wrongly interpreted something, then a penalty will maybe happen to them, and actually there's a lot of money involved in there. So it's not only about proficiency and productivity and efficiency, it's also about customer reliability and risk management, what we can improve here. The other thing is, today we still have silos of data. When you look in an average enterprise, you will find, I have a customer here, they operate, I don't blame them, but of course they operate about 6,000 Oracle databases, 6,000, and all of those databases are sharing information and dependencies to each other. So that means actually to understand what is really in the databases, what is really important, you actually have to consolidate, and you have to start with some intelligence in there, and traditional methods like SQL or writing like that is not an option on that. The other thing, we talked about compliance and regulatory forces here as well. The solution imperatives always, as I said before, should be accuracy, explainability, security, privacy, sustainability for our electrical discussion here, and the transparency in general. Okay. when we start with data, everybody says about data. Data is actually the ground source, actually, but it's not the information. We are looking not for data, we are looking for information, what's in the data. And that data needs to be validated, verified upfront. So therefore, it's very important to have actually a process here for data clearance. Otherwise, you will actually end up and have maybe toxic or wrong data in your data environment, which definitely will lead also to false information and also, of course, to misleading, let's say, results. The other thing is, of course, when you actually add the data to the information, then you build up the knowledge, and then, of course, over time, like we all do, you will end up with experience, because we learn by our training and our experience we have seen, and so the same is actually with our system in here. I give you an example on that. Our LISA X, what we called it LISA X, this little POC, what we have done here, is actually a system that collects data from various data domains. And the idea here was actually to have a set of data, of information sets, and this could be replicated into an artificial intelligence SME, and this could be actually the one I could ask to my personal domains. So in a traditional way, if I look actually on the individual roles, might be that behind each of those information domains there is a whole team, or maybe at least a user or a person behind there who has that knowledge. If I give that knowledge or this information to a centralized thing who can really calculate on, then of course I can do a much better job here and be much more efficient for my results on that. A very important point I mentioned before, and that was a design criteria from upfront, was actually also the information sharing. And this was something, of course, that came out also with other, I don't blame the other builders like ChatGPT or Copilot, but of course they have made some challenges in here. Imagine you actually add to a large enterprise system information in documents, and maybe Danko is not allowed to read those documentation, but she will be allowed to read those documentation, and you will be probably, Frank, will be allowed to read the documentation. Yeah. No, you. Okay, you should be, anyway. But anyway, it's the same like we have today with data access. And we have seen actually when you have no data clearance in here, and if you have no data rights and protection, maybe you cannot read the document, the PDF on the file server. But if you ask the system then later on, what actually was Danko integrating in here, and the system replies to you very open, oh, this was this document, and there was this report, and this was this information on. So it's a very chatty thing. And that happened a couple of times and has led to many trouble here with some of our customers, because they were not understanding that there is a dependency then actually in the information sharing. And there's something I said, we want to make sure that this is not happening from day one on. That means we have a very granular way where we can say on user level, on domain level, on geography level or so, we can definitely make sure that only those information is being transported to those people who have the right to know. If somebody from HR is probably looking for some information in another department which he should not know about, then it's actually not possible to get to that information. The other thing is, we are using here not only in RAG, we are using very old technology actually, and I think you know, it's called symbolic AI. And if you look actually in the old papers from 1956, this was actually one of the Dartmouth conferences already discussed in symbolic AI. But the problem was there was not the performance and there was not the capability on technology for doing that. And meanwhile, of course, we can do that. Symbolic AI, in consideration of, let's say, traditional ways like what we have here with a simple LLM input or the RAG, you all know and familiar with, has the advantage we have a shorter parse also to the data. We can definitely simplify that. And secondly, that's also coming back to my sustainability thing. We need less energy for doing similar tasks like we would do actually with an RAG system. So that's a big helper here. And that's also something we have built in to our system here. Oh, by the way, and last not least, the LLM itself or the SLM could be replaceable. That means if you have your customized LLM or your SLM or whatever, that could be the engine then depending on your demand. But of course, we are very open here in considerations of the LLM integration. So what is our LISA-X is doing is our new kit on the AI block. We have our digital advisor assistant, and a very exciting thing was also we can have automation in there built as well. For instance, the European Central Bank or BaFin, they are sending out reports and questionnaires with hundreds or thousands of questions sometimes, and usually you receive the question and say, hey team, come together, these questions need to be answered by Friday afternoon next week, and then of course a team starts and rushes up. Here we can say, this is a list of questions, give it to the system like in a batch job, and maybe 10 minutes later you have the results on that. Even the results might not be exact as you actually expect them to be, then the system still will give you the hint where the definition is coming from, where the data is coming from, and will help you actually to drive deeper. This shortens the path for that information from days to hours to minutes actually sometimes. Yeah, that's a very important thing. So we can read and learn and build knowledge from thousands of pages in seconds. Because of the performance of the GPUs I showed you before, there is no consideration anymore that we cannot help on that. And we also can train the system on calculations, which is somehow very hard because sometimes you have graphics in your PDFs or your documentation where percentages are in there or money is actually mentioned. And on one page is mentioned 45% of the economy income in that case or whatever, then you want to understand what does it mean in consideration of the investor or whatever, then these calculations can be done by the system automatically. So it understands numbers in written form, but also in really outwritten form in words. Security, privacy, we just talked about. So, and these are some of the considerations. That's our GUI, what we have built up here. It's not a fancy one, I know, and I'm usually beaten by that because we say, well, we have to build up a more fancier GUI, but anyway, it's more for me, it's actually the use case behind. And what we have integrated in that GUI, on the right-hand side, you can see also a little more, don't call it a dashboard, that would be exaggerating here. But of course, we have also a monitor in there, and that was a demand from our financial customer. Because they wanted to understand how much energy I am consuming for this particular task. So we definitely can show you how much energy you as a user or your user group or your department or whatever is presently using on your user level and on the department level as well. That gives also the feedback then for the sustainability report, because ESG management, for instance, is of highest concern. And here we can definitely show how much is really consumed and where the energy is going to. Secondly, that's also a very important one. I mentioned that before with an example from Danko. We can also have the possibility, and this is something, of course, not many can do presently right now. We have the possibility to use the metadata of documents in a way that we analyze a document first on the behalf of, is it copyright protected? Is it actually redacted? So is a document able to be AI processed? For instance, we got from a consulting company, a very large one just down the street here. I don't have to mention the name, but of course in the documents actually they have meanwhile actually a disclaimer which says it's not allowed to process such a document in any AI system. That means you get the document, but you are not allowed to put it to any AI system. Otherwise, you have a copyright issue, then and a compliance issue. You can buy that actually. They want to make. I assume it's also a money discussion anyway. But of course, we are checking those informations up front and make the user aware that this is actually actually something he should know about. And if he is willing, we still can process on that. And because we say, well, if you have the license, we can process on that. But it's your duty then as a user to understand what you are doing here. The feedback from our financial, the motivation from our financial customers, well, just transfer the PDF information to a new format, and then we take this, and then of course we are outside. Well, this is a very tricky way, but that's not what we are doing here. But anyway, that's actually something what we can do. We are using the metadata of the document to understand if it's possible to process it, and also, of course, on the other hand, who has a right in the user group to understand and read those information. If there's a redacted document, especially for legal partners like judges or so, they actually want not to show everything maybe to their peers or whatever. That's actually something what we have considered here from day one on. And like I said before, we have also the must query, so you can say, well, usually we build up a JSON file, a large JSON file with questions, and this questionnaire can run against libraries of information, single documents, a variety of file systems, whatever you mean, and then you can say, this is a questionnaire, and these are the answering sets. So I want to have the answers from those sets back, and then of course you can get a list of all the information which was stored, and the system will also show if there is a coincidence, or if there is a difference, or if there is a gap in there. And this is actually something we are working on presently. We call it gap analytics. That means if you have I give you an example, if you have a certain KPI in your company and say, well, I want to reduce my CO2 footprint by whatever, 20% in next year. Where am I today? What efforts I'm taking here? And what would be the best practices based on certain documents and information coming from? And so the system can tell you where you are today, what is presently being done, what initiatives are running, the financials on that, and what would be the next best action for you to perform on such a task. That's actually something we have also built into our little system. Last not least, and I think that's a very important one according to audits. I'll give you another example. If you actually have an answer coming from the system and you will use it in a real serious business case, for instance, for reporting, maybe you have an audit after a while, then somebody from the auditors will ask you, how was this answer coming from? Who was actually ingesting the data? Where was the data coming from? All of that is actually listed in here in a way that we can go back to whatever level here and show exactly from data heritage, from a user heritage, based on the user ID, the IP address, and everything in there. And that's all stored then in our database in the system as well. And a little side effect, actually, we have also an information store in there. That means if you already have asked the system a certain question, you still can go directly to the database, so you don't have to get to the documents first, because all your information and your answers are stored in there as well. That's also very useful and takes out a lot of energy here. Yeah. At the end of the day, we have a large, let's say, operational model here. So that means we can work on a variety of data, from operational data, like I said before, to standards. Then you can do, well, these are the laws and the legal things. And this is actually my daily work and my daily data that's flowing in. I can do my gap analytics. I can do all of that. You can still do it manually. And of course, like I said before, when I come to my customers, they have terabytes and petabytes of storage sitting there, but the data is really buried somehow in the storage. It's not really taken of effect. And here, of course, we have a methodology and a solution what we can do. I was recently working on with a company in Israel, DIP. So we have built. No, it's the next question. It's the next slide, I think. First, first, the hardware here we have taken, it's not a big thing. That means actually we don't have to rebuild Amazon or Meta or something like that. We can start quite simple here, and our development, it looks very much like that here. We have just only 1 or 2 servers here, one front end for the security part and the backend server where the GPUs are running in. And already with this little implementation, we could get highly granular results and very, very good feedback then from the users. That means the invest for such a solution is not something, of course, customers should shy away and say, well, this is for the millionaires, for Elon Musk or somebody like that level. Here we can definitely start in a very low 3-digit or maybe 100K arrangement here, because that's definitely a very small footprint. And what I said before, we have done a little experiment, and this was, in my opinion, it was driven by our marketing organization, but due to the fact that we have open APIs in both directions from the data and also to the output, we were using a DIP avatar here for a show. That means you can, if you have a use case where maybe an avatar might be of use, you can click this just actually up front of that. There is no big problems of integration. It's just actually a consideration how the API is to be connected, and then you can take it off. That's very, very smart and very simple. So I'm in time. Yeah, am I in time? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and that's also a slide from us, from Lenovo here, because I'm representing also our Lenovo technology here. So we can really drive the whole Lenovo's hardware stack here. So that means actually any kind of design and any kind of server and storage what you need on your data pipeline, we can definitely help on the architecture here and also on the deployment of that with our services here and our partners. And what I say, this is definitely, and this is an AI is definitely a team play. That means that this is actually something no one alone can build up such a system. You always have to count on partners. You always have to count on people, on technology, on development, on operations also, because operations is also a very important thing. So therefore, it's really means to have the right team together. And if the team is inspired and collaborating, then of course the results can be very, very positive and very promising. Okay, thank you very much.
Questions?
Questions?
Here.
Thank you. Do you use it only for your company, or you can use it also for others?
Excuse me?
Can you use this for other companies too?
Oh, absolutely, of course. It's actually something that is not for Lenovo or for us. It's going to be a solution what we are aiming for our customers. And oh, by the way, you are in the lucky seats here. And I give you a little glimpse what we are presently doing. We are building up a demo center right here in Frankfurt, showing this solution. I think we will have in January, February time frame, we will have everything right in order. We are doing this with 2 partners together, and we actually offer you to have your own demo. That means actually once we have, I will come back to you then and share the link with you. We actually can give you the link, and then you can test it out on your own, free of charge. And this is, of course, something I say we will have in the time frame of January, February or so.
I'm not sure if you already mentioned that. Is it based on a large language model, or is it trained from the scratch?
Well, we actually are open to the large language model. What I said before, we have the symbolic engine in here. That's the Semaphora engine from a company called Semaphora. They are close to Frankfurt, by the way. It's a small startup as well, but of course a very intelligent one. And what we are using then is an SLM on LLM of any dimension. So you can come with your Llama 3, or you can bring in your own SLM. We can plug this in. There's no question about the SLM or the LLM what you are bringing in. But a very important thing I want to mention is the SLM or the LLM defines more or less the requirements also for the GPUs, because it needs to fit into the GPU. So therefore, that's actually a discussion we need to have also upfront when we start such a project. And we have multiple GPU operation considerations. I have so many things I have to consider about GPUs. I showed you the way we are doing it with NVIDIA. NVIDIA was our first choice because there was nothing else when we started that. But meanwhile, we have ARM, we have also an Intel. That means we are not bound to CUDA any longer. That means we actually can say, well, if you have a certain need where maybe an Intel GPU, Gaudi GPU makes sense, then we are handling that as well. That means we have freedom of choice, and this gives you also more flexibility depending on your use case.
And how do you maintain the system? How do you update information? Is it regularly? Is it based on the same model, or you train it again from the scratch with the whole data? How does it happen?
We are not updating that actually. We are not managing the LLM. The LLM is still with the customer. We are managing the application. Consider it as an application, like an empty Excel framework. But of course, the information for your data, that always has to come from the customer. And what the customer is feeding into the system, that's of course his choice. But anyway, you are right. It's a very important thing anyway. You have to have a data management inside the operations then, definitely, to make sure.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. In my organization, we're facing similar issues, and I would like to ask on the solution architecture.
Can you take the mic a little closer, yeah?
Okay. Would you consider a unified system? For example, from my understanding, you have on the top of the level this semantic or synaptic AI, and then you have RAGs. Would you consider a single RAG for the whole document base, or would you differentiate between domains? For example, you have HR, you have finance, whatever.
That is a good question. We can do it in a single system because of the security rules we just showed before, but there are in some customer situations there are certain rules. Even today, it has nothing to do with AI, but the technology has not to be shared between certain departments because of rules. But we can do both models here, definitely.
In that case, would you consider agentic AI, or would you stick with the top level that you have implemented?
What's the question?
Would you consider agentic AI?
Agentic AI?
Yes, you have one top classifier or top LLM that would take the requests, the queries from the users.
Okay, yeah. You also here we have the flexibility to go both directions. You can actually have it on one monolithic approach, but also on the other hand, you can have also your individual departmental related LLMs or whatever it might be. Yeah. So you have your own, let's say, advisors or dedicated advisors within the system. And because of our user concept, we can make sure that no one is coming across. Otherwise, of course, he has the authority to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question like, where are the servers where all this is running? Do you have a software that you give to the customer, configure them there, and they are running their servers on premise? Do you run your own system and your customers can use it, or do you use the usual suspects like Google Cloud, AWS, and so on?
Well, we are from Lenovo. We sell usually servers. That's actually something, of course, where we say, and this was a requirement of the customers, because they say, well, we are taking away those information from cloud services because we want to make sure that this is not leaving our customer data center. So I don't say we are competing against AWS or Azure or Copilot or so. I say only, of course, for certain use cases where those rules apply, apply, then of course we have an option. And the other thing is, as I showed you before, we can interact also with the cloud. That is also a hybrid cloud concept. We can have it both on premises as well as in the cloud. So depending on the rules and the utilization, we can do both ways.
But in this case, I would guess your system is not so much for the SME market, but it's for a little bit bigger companies.
No. What I said before, what we have built up in our development system is a very tiny infrastructure. It's actually just only for development. But of course, if you do it productivity, you need to have redundancy and all of that stuff. We can start with 2 servers, 2 small 1 HE servers. This is very, very small. And as I said before, the investment for the systems is not in the millions, definitely not. So therefore, of course, and this was the intention also from this financial customer, because I said they came up with the ESG use case when you have to, for SME, for small customers, small enterprises, that they have to make reporting on supply chain and all of that stuff, which takes a lot of effort. And they say, well, if we jointly can help those customers to help them with an AI system built on our technology, but of course on a private way, then of course we are in the game. And that was one of the design criteria.
So in a summary, you can even have small systems, but the preferred target customer buys Lenovo, some nice Lenovo servers.
Absolutely.
And gets the software and hopefully a nice account for a discount for everything.
Well, we have presently we are not ready that we have a, let's say, price tag on that. We are presently in the final definitions on that, and this is of course presently going on. It might well be that we have this as a software only. My preference would be that we have it as an appliance or a bundle, but that's actually something what we are presently internally discussing right now. What will be the best approach to market? Yeah.
Got it. And I mean, I come from the telephone industry. There was always this habit of renting these systems. So if you make an all-in-one appliance and rent it for, say, 5 or 10 years,
yeah,
that could be an interesting for small companies.
That's an offering we already have. It's called a TrueScale. That means actually you don't have to buy it. You can rent it, or maybe you have to pay per usage. And that's a design what we are presently discussing. How are we selling the system? Are we selling it with upfront cost, or selling by numbers of ingested documents or pages or queries? So there are various models what we are calculating right now on. And of course, I'm very happy if you share some feedback what your suggestion would be, because that's already, we have still in the design phase here, what we can help you also, of course, on your best wishes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. One more question.
It was very interesting talk. Thank you for it. I was surprised to see the symbolic AI coming back. I would like to ask on what was the basis of bringing symbolic AI, and how do you decide that symbolic AI should be used instead of the RAG solution?
The quality, you mean?
Yeah, like the answers that are being generated.
Oh, yeah. That was, again, quality goes well with accuracy. You know, when you have such a system, you want to have really information you can count on. So therefore, we have done a lot of tests in advance, actually, where we definitely were reading by reading personally long books, and we actually came to the conclusion. We had a consulting company also checking for that, because we say we want to be neutral on that. So the consulting company was actually giving us results they were expecting from the system. And then, of course, we were going back to the system and say, well, this is an official report from a consultant company, and this is, of course, that the system should be able to respond to. And, of course, the response was in such a way that the head of the consulting company says exactly that's what we were expecting. And so, therefore, this is, in my opinion, also a very good quality sign in that case.
Okay, thank you.
Question from my side: what is the pre-flight checklist? So what does the customer do need to prepare to install this?
Well, that's actually, there's a process. We have a process for that. And actually, it really depends what type of task you are looking for. As I said before, it all starts with a use case. And sometimes I get a little angry because people say, well, we want to introduce AI, but I say, well, what are you trying to do with AI? Because it really depends what you are doing. And here we definitely need to understand, for instance, about the data management. How is the data presently being done? And if the customer says, well, we have someone who is managing a database, so it's not enough. So we definitely have to understand how it's really being done, where the information flow is coming from, how this information is processed today. You need a little to understand the business processes, how it works today, and also the data for these business processes, the compliance regulations, and then of course we can come back and make a design for such an application. Like you said before, it depends also about how many documents do I really ingest, how many users do I want to have working concurrently. Is it just only a group of 5 people who are asking 5 questions a day, or do I have it actually in a large enterprise with 10,000 seats? So this is really depending then on the sizing of that. But of course here we have a process how to do that, and we can show the customer in each dimension where he will end up then.
Well, this was the sizing side, but actually my thought was, how about the processes, the data quality, and the access to the data?
Exactly. That's one thing what we have to ask up front, because we have, what I said before, we need to understand how the data is presently being created, where the data is located. Is the data in the data center? Is it actually what we have also recognized with some of the customers, especially in legal and in banking? We still have a ton of paper sitting there, and that still needs to be also integrated. And it's not helpful just only to scan a document and then bring it up there, because it needs to be also taken over in a readable, machine-readable format. So there are a couple of such questions up front, and we definitely, this is something we are working on, definitely. Oh, one more question.
Thank you. My question is, like, in the legal area, what 2 or 3 legal areas have been the most challenging for you to comply with?
Well, in legal, I'm not an expert on legal, to be honest, but of course we had a discussion with some of our customers, and they say, well, legal is very, very special, because in Germany we have 1,000 legal rules. Not even in the Gerichte, in the judge or the court, you are allowed to share data between various parties. So therefore, of course, it's very challenging there. But anyway, in my opinion, tax and legal are very highly interested areas, because they have a ton of millions of documents. I was just recently talking to the district attorney of a big city here in Germany, and he said they are losing cases because the judges cannot read the information in time, so they are missing timelines, and then of course the process is being stopped. And this is actually just because of the amount of data that needs to be processed, or not the amount of data, the amount of information that needs to be processed. And if they would have such a system, that would be excellent, because they would actually at least get a hint where to look into. And if you have a ton of documents on your side that needs to be processed, that can be a very, very complicated way. No.
Okay, so we have to stop at some point.
Yeah.
Let's thank our speaker.